All right. Well, hello, guys. We have another, uh, hopefully interesting video today. I want to talk some more about end times prophecy, and just I would like to give a little more detail to some of the things that I've talked about in the past. And we're not going to answer all the questions of Bible prophecy. Bible prophecy is hard. And really, if you want to know it, you got to be studying Ezekiel, Daniel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, because this is a key biblical principle when it comes to Bible prophecy, that God gave the prophets in the Old Testament a message for their time, and then he gave them a sealed message for the end times. And those messages that were sealed can't be known until the time of the end, and we see that Jesus clearly tells this to Daniel. So this is Daniel speaking. He says, "And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things?" Daniel is being given all these revelations by Jesus, and he wants to know the answer. And Jesus tells him, "Go thy way, Daniel," basically. Don't worry about it, Daniel. Forget about it, Daniel. Mind your own business, Daniel. The words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. In other words, you're not going to be able to understand this stuff yet because it's sealed until the time of the end. And we see in Jesus' own lifetime, in the last video, well, one of the last videos that I did, I mentioned that during Jesus' lifetime, he outright says that he doesn't know the timing of some of the end times events. This is Jesus in his lifetime saying that. Why? Because that was 2,000 years ago. The time of the end hadn't come yet. Those things were still sealed, and Jesus was not omniscient during his earthly life. He had emptied himself of some of his divine attributes, including his omniscience. He didn't know all things. He knew the things that he needed to know and that the Father revealed to him during his earthly lifetime. But he didn't know all the timing of the end at that point. And so this is why we see in other places in the scriptures that the prophets have always wrestled and struggled with these spiritual things, trying to understand them, earnestly searching them out, but never really being able to come to an answer, because these things were sealed until the time of the end. And we are some of the most fortunate people alive right now. Now, it's not going to seem like that as things culminate and really start to pick up, but I do believe that we are some of the most fortunate people who have ever lived. We have the completed Word of God, and a lot of things are becoming unsealed now, which allows us to have more insight than ever before into where we are and what's coming next. And I think that is amazing. So I kind of wanted to just give a little more detail. You guys know that I believe in a mid-tribulation rapture, and I've laid out that timeline from the scriptures, and I've supported everything that I believe, I think, from the scriptures. And I think that's a pretty solid. I think there's a ton of scripture that supports it. At this point in time, I cannot, in good conscience, believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. I just can't. I call that Tim LaHaye eschatology, and some of the people teaching it are very concerning to me. And then we have Hollywood that's picked up that doctrine and pushed it through the Left Behind movies. And I think whenever Hollywood is pushing something, we really should double check it and ask, is this interpretation a good interpretation of this prophecy, or are we being deceived and given a false narrative and a private interpretation? So I think I referred to Daniel's prophetic 70 weeks in a previous video, and I didn't really give you the passage where that came from, so I want to talk about that first, and that's going to kind of be start us off and get the ball rolling. Alright, so we have the 70 weeks of Daniel. Let me just read this, starting in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks. And the street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. The people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. Unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. All right. So these 70 weeks are kind of like and these are weeks of days, by the way. So each week is a 7-year period. And so we see here, I was just, all right, let's focus here. I'm getting caught up on another idea here that's sticking in my mind. And I might be wrong on some of this stuff. If I am, by all means, feel free to put anything down in the comments that I'm missing. I actually was just looking at this verse in a little more detail, and I might want to revisit this and rethink through some of this stuff. But anyway, so we've got, where is it? Yep, 62 weeks. After 62 weeks, score is 20, so 60, and 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. So that's the crucifixion, and this is by the way, prophecy. It's referring to Jesus Christ being the Messiah, and he's going to be cut off or killed, but not for himself. He came to save his people, and indeed all of humanity, from our sins. That's why he died on the cross as our perfect sacrifice. And understand that this isn't something that the blood of goats and bulls and so forth, and all these sacrificial animals in the Old Testament, they didn't atone for sin. They were a symbol looking forward to what Messiah would do. And even a human sacrifice, if that human lived a completely perfect, sinless life, that wouldn't atone for the sin of all humanity. This is just another evidence that Jesus was God in the flesh. Only God in the flesh could die and atone for the sins of all humanity. A human being can't do this, even if a human being could live a sinless life, which is not possible. But even if they could, they would not be able to atone for the sins of all mankind. It just wouldn't be doable. So this is prophecy, again, that Jesus is going to be God in human form. Now, here's where we start to kind of get into some interesting stuff, because the timing of some of these events isn't really known with certainty. So the crucifixion is speculated to have taken place somewhere between Anno Domini AD, the year of our Lord, 30 to 33, somewhere in there most commonly. But if you dig around, you'll find that there's actually quite a range of estimates, anywhere from AD 18 to AD 36. We know the Second Temple was destroyed in AD 70. And I've heard some people say that there's only 1 week left on the prophetic timeline. And I'm actually wondering if there's actually 2 weeks left on the prophetic timeline. And my thought on that is that, so we're in something called the time of the Gentiles right now. And I believe that the prophetic timeline is on pause while there is no temple. That's my belief. And for that reason, I'm going to show you in just a moment here. I think there's actually 2 weeks left on the prophetic timeline, and I have a reason for thinking that. But anyway, the Second Temple was destroyed in AD 70, and so if a week is 7 years, let's say there's 2 weeks left on the prophetic timeline. So Jesus was crucified at 62 weeks. AD 70 is when the Second Temple was destroyed. So if there's 2 weeks left on the timeline, that leaves us with 68 weeks. 68 weeks minus 62 weeks is 6 weeks. 6 times 7 is 42 years. So AD 70 minus 42 years puts us at approximately AD, what is that, AD 28? So that is in the ballpark of approximately when Jesus was estimated to have been crucified. And so I'm not going to be dogmatic about this, whether there's 1 or 2 weeks left on the prophetic timeline. So the tribulation is a period of 7 years, and this is the 70th week on Daniel's prophetic timeline. But as I mentioned, we might actually have 2 weeks left on the prophetic timeline, and I'll show you what I mean by that in just a little bit here. But let's go to Luke 21:24 and talk about the time of the Gentiles real quick. And so some of this stuff I think is pretty well substantiated by Scripture and pretty firm in my mind anyways. But understand that we're in the middle of these things, and a lot of it hasn't happened yet, and it's not going to be clear until it's over and done with. And so I don't want you to think that I don't want to come across as being dogmatic about any of this. I could be very wrong about many of these things. And that's why I try to support stuff with Scripture and show you the greater context and the data points, I guess, if you want to call them that, that show why I'm thinking what I'm thinking. I try to substantiate this stuff as best as I can. And if my thinking and reasoning process isn't clear for whatever reason, feel free to ask questions about it. Or feel free to show me scriptures that I don't cover that relate to this stuff that show that I'm wrong, or show that I'm right. And really, it's not about being right, and it's not about being wrong. It's about understanding what God tells us is going to happen, because this is revelation that we have from God. And it will come to pass. It might just not come to pass the way that we think it will. Now, we are told that we should study the Scriptures. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable, and we should study these things. It doesn't make sense to say that we can never know this stuff. We should never study this stuff, because God specifically thought it was worthwhile to give this stuff to us. So we should study it out and try to understand to the best of our understanding. And as I mentioned there and showed you in the book of Daniel, during the times of the end, this stuff gets unlocked, unsealed. And I do believe, because that very last chapter of Daniel says so, it says that the wise will understand. And I think the wise are those who do what God told us to do, study the Scriptures, work these things out, and try to figure them out with the guidance of the Holy Spirit. As it says here in Daniel 12:10, many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And notice this doesn't say that all the saints will understand, because all the saints aren't wise. Some of them are, some of them aren't. It does say that the wise will understand. And that is a promise we see echoed in many places in the Scriptures. It's in James as well. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally and upbraideth not. That's my paraphrase. It's pretty close to what James says. Actually, maybe we'll just try to find that in James real quick. Yeah, here we go. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. This is a promise that God has answered for me many times. My problem is more that I'm pretty cowardly sometimes, and I'm afraid to ask for wisdom because I don't always like the things that I'm shown. And And there's a cost that comes with knowledge. As the scriptures say, much knowledge, much sorrow. But, moving on, let's talk about the times of the Gentiles, Luke 21. Luke 21:24. And there's actually a lot of stuff in this passage that's real interesting. So it says here, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. They here, I believe, is a reference to the Jewish people. And they have been scattered, for sure. And by the way, so there's some people that say the abomination of desolation happened when the temple was destroyed, AD 70, and that all these things are fulfilled already. But I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, there was a desolation back then, sure, and a lot of people, but it doesn't fit or satisfy all of the biblical elements that relate to that. Let me just put it that way. All right, and let's read this as well. The coming of the Son of Man. And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And they shall see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Let me read that again. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Some of this stuff is judgment that God's going to heap on a world that has rejected Christ and that has slaughtered God's saints. We're not going to have to live through all this stuff, but when we see these things begin to come to pass, we'll know that we're in the zone and our redemption is drawing nigh. As I mentioned, I do believe in a mid-tribulation rapture, and I think I've substantiated that before in other videos, and I think that I will just in course of as we go through this video as well, Lord willing. Okay. So let's go back to Daniel, because as I mentioned in my last video, this is where I'm getting my detailed timeline from. So back to Daniel 12. Okay. Daniel 12:11, and from the time that the daily sacrifices shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. It's about 3.5 years. Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,305 days. Okay, so this gives us this little snippet here. It's a period of time that's about 3.5 years long. So we have an event, that's the sacrifices being taken away. Then we have this 1,290 days. Then we have another event, and we know that that is the abomination of desolation. And then at the 1,335-day mark, or about 45 days after the abomination of desolation, we have another event. And this event here is a blessed event. And I have mentioned before that we're in the tribulation. I think the only blessed event that this could be would be the rapture, and I believe that this is the rapture. But this is a little snippet of 3.5 years. So if we have our rapture period, Daniel's 70th week, and it is, I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and it's a 7-year period right there. That's our 7-year period, and we'll do a little mark in the middle, and we have this approximately 3.5-year period that's delineated here in this verse in Daniel. So now we got to ask the question: do these events go in the first half or the latter half of the 7-year tribulation period? Well, we don't have to guess about that because we have Daniel 9:27. So let's go back and look at that. and you may have seen it in passing already and sort of connected the dots for yourself. It says here, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week shall he cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate. So what is this? This is a reference to the Antichrist and the abomination of desolation once again. And it says specifically in the midst of the week. So in the middle of the week is and we're talking about a week of years, in the midst of the week is the abomination of desolation. So we know then, based on that the abomination of desolation is here. That means that the ceasing of the sacrifices is here, and that puts this little snippet of about 3.5 years that we just saw from Daniel 12 at the first half of the 7-year tribulation. So let's go ahead and just put all that stuff in. And if that's the abomination of desolation, then 45 days later we've got this blessed event. Alright, so let's go ahead and get some text in here. And so we've got taking away of sacrifices. So that's going to be the beginning of the tribulation period. Then we have the abomination of desolation. That's at the midpoint. We just saw that. We have a blessed event. I believe this is the rapture. Put that right there. Alright, so we've got 3.5 years. Nope, not 35. 3.5. We've got 45 days. I don't know that I'm going to try to be too... That's right there. I guess you guys can all tell what I'm talking about here. Or should we just do 45? Oh, yeah, we can make it a little smaller. Okay. Anyway. So that's our 45 days right there. Okay. And I think that's pretty solid. You might disagree with me. By all means, feel free to school me on this if I've got it wrong. I want to make some comments, though, from Daniel 9:27, because I think this is really interesting, and this is going to take us go back to where I think that we have 2 weeks left on the prophetic timeline, and here's why. So it says here, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. So we've got a little bit of a problem here. We have to ask the question, is 1 week and the week the same week? And I don't think they can be, because it's in the midst of the week that he causes the sacrifice and oblation to cease, and then makes the temple desolate with the abomination of desolations. And if that's happening in the middle of the week here, then obviously he hasn't been confirming the covenant for a solid week. And then taking away the sacrifices too, I think that's problematic. So here's my thought. The 1 week and the week are 2 separate weeks. In other words, this is the week. This is Daniel's 70th week, the culmination, what we call the tribulation, where everything comes to a head and finalizes. This here is the consummation. I'm just going to go ahead and put that in, actually, because that's what the Bible calls it, the consummation. Did I spell that right? I don't know. Let's go check the scriptures. Until the consummation. I did spell it right. Yay. Okay, cool. So that's the consummation. So back here to the right, if we continue on, is the millennial kingdom. We're not going to talk about that today, because we've talked about that in other videos a little bit, and that's not the purpose right now. But the consummation is when Jesus is... so we've got the... actually, we'll put this into second coming. So the second coming and the rapture are not the same event. The second coming is when Jesus returns with the armies of heaven. and slays all his enemies with the sword of his mouth, and then is crowned king forever and ever. And from that point on, throughout the millennial kingdom and through the period of what's called Satan's little season, although there's actually a couple little seasons in Revelation, but that time that Satan's loosed for a little while to stir up a rebellion at the end of the millennial kingdom, that rebellion's not even a blip on heaven's radar. Jesus' throne and dominion is not going to be shaken in any way whatsoever. The Bible promises that once Jesus takes the throne, he's never going to lose it again. And so this tells you something. It tells you that we're not in the millennial kingdom now, and that we've never been in the millennial kingdom at any point in history. Because, let me ask you a question. Does it look like Jesus Christ and his government of saints are ruling on the earth right now? Does it look like that to you? It doesn't look like that to me. And the Bible's clear. Once Jesus takes the throne, he's not going to lose the throne. Ergo, it follows that Jesus has not yet taken the throne, because look at the world and the state that it's in right now. Okay? But that's the consummation. Jesus gets crowned King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and he's on the throne forever after that point, and never loses the crown again. Ever. Okay. Abomination, desolation. I think I confused myself. Okay, so we were talking about the 2 weeks. I don't think that the week, the tribulation week, and the 1 week in which the covenant's being confirmed, I don't think these are the same weeks. And so we have a logical problem that we've got to ask, and I think we can reason it from the scriptures, and that's this. If there's the taking away of sacrifices, and that begins the tribulation 7-year period, then at some point we've got to have the sacrifices reinstated and the temple rebuilt. And these are things that Israel is looking to do right now, and they're being pretty sneaky about it and giving us a lot of false information about how it's going down. In other words, there's a week, and if my lines are crooked and it messes with your mind, I am so sorry, but I have shaky hands and I'm doing this on my computer with a touchpad, and it's not pretty. So I'm just going to apologize in advance. Just adding that in for a little color. So actually, let's do this, because I believe that this is the week. And so in the midst of the week is when we have the abomination of desolations. But this is a week, or 7 years. And what's the start of this 7-year period? Well, I think that it's this third temple, and sacrifices begin. So the third temple is rebuilt and the sacrifices begin. And I think I mentioned this in my last video. I'm going to talk about it again very, very quickly. Freemasonry and what's called the Royal Arch. So when you hit the Royal Arch degree in Freemasonry, and there's at least 2 paths to it. It exists within Scottish Rite Freemasonry. It exists within York Rite Freemasonry. The Royal Arch degree is when Freemasons learn the name of their god. And it is not Jesus. And they learn the purpose of Freemasonry, which is to rebuild the Royal Arch, which is a rebuilt temple. Pardon my spelling issues. A rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. All right. And as I think I talked about this in the last video, it is highly likely that Donald Trump is a Scottish Rite Freemason. Highly likely. But anyway, logically, if the start of the tribulation is the taking away the sacrifices, then we need to see the temple rebuilt and sacrifices begin. And since the Antichrist is confirming the covenant for a week, 7 years, it makes sense that that's a 7 year period before the tribulation when the sacrifices are going on. Now, there's another way that we could look at it. We could actually take this 7 week period and slide it forward a little bit and have the end of it at the abomination of desolation and say that that's the confirming of the covenant period. But I think the taking away the sacrifices is going to be a betrayal of the covenant. And so I think that it doesn't make sense to overlap this period with this period. So I think we're looking at 2 distinct weeks or 7 year periods. And that's why I was saying that I think there are still 2 weeks left on the prophetic timeline. And so I believe that the thing that's going to unpause, as I mentioned here, I think the prophetic timeline is on pause while there's no temple. And while there's no temple, we're in the times of the Gentiles right now. Now what's going to happen is the temple's going to be rebuilt, and that takes the prophetic timeline off of pause. Now we're into those 2 weeks or 14 years before the second coming of Christ. That's how I believe it's going to go down. And I think the scriptures substantiate this pretty well. I think it just makes a ton of sense, reasoning logically from the scriptures. Let me just see. Donald Trump, Jerusalem, temple coin. I want to show you guys something. Images. This is fascinating. There are all these commemorative coins of Donald Trump, gold coins, silver coins, Donald Trump's head on one side, and a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem on the other side. Or Jewish, to fulfill 70 years. Look at this, Jewish menorah. By the way, they have all the trappings they need. They just need the temple. They've got the Ark of the Covenant. I don't know if you saw that story going around this last week. But yeah, they've got the Ark of the Covenant. They've been touring a replica Ark of the Covenant around the world. One of the first places it was displayed was Mar-a-Lago, interestingly enough. And they've said of that Ark of the Covenant, so the Temple Institute and some of these Jewish authorities, they're speaking out of both sides of their mouths. All right. So on the one hand, well, they said this about that replica, that it is a perfect copy of the original Ark of the Covenant. So let me ask you a question. How can you have a perfect copy of something unless you have the original to work off of and make a perfect copy from? They've got the Ark of the Covenant, folks. And if you don't know about that stuff, look up a guy named Ron Wyatt. Actually, we'll go to ronwyatt.com real quick. ronwyatt.com. Very humble man. He's the guy who Indiana Jones was heavily inspired by this guy. All right. So he found just so many different things from the Old Testament. If you're into Bible archaeology, you definitely should look into some of this stuff. So he found the real site of Mount Sinai. It's in Arabia. The Bible says it's in Arabia. It never was in the Sinai Peninsula. Let me just let's do a little search. Sinai, Arabia. For this Agar's Mount Sinai in Arabia. Okay, there you go. So we know Mount Sinai was in Arabia, which makes sense because Midian was the western part of Arabia. That's where Moses took refuge. Sodom and Gomorrah. Let me say this. There's a lot of things out west in the United States and in other places of the world that look like natural canyons and formations, but they're not. They're ancient ruins from the old world. In some cases from the pre-flood world, before the time of Noah. And in some cases, like Sodom and Gomorrah, these remnants have just been turned into slag in the case of the cities of the plain by this intense flame that God sent down. But these places are known. And anyway, Ron Wyatt was instrumental in finding a lot of these sites. This is the Nuweiba Beach on that eastern arm of the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba, where the Red Sea crossing took place. We know where all this stuff happened. There's evidence there. There's evidence at the Mount Sinai site. There's stone rings that probably were used to weigh down tents. There are animal pens made out of stones. There's markers around the mountain. The mountain is blackened at the top. There's an altar area. We know where a lot of these things took place. Masada overlooks one of the destroyed cities of the plain. A lot of people just look at it and think that it's natural formations because it's been, several thousand years, at least 3,000 years. And the cities were basically melted. That's how fervent the heat was, just melted and turned into ash where they stood. And this was a city at one point in time. They had this system of terraces and beautiful walls, and it was just astoundingly gorgeous architecture at one point in time. And by the way, this is still the time of the giants back then, so they may have had some help constructing some of that architecture, and there may have been people with Nephilim descended blood living in these cities and stuff like that who helped build them, which is why you had a lot of colossal architecture from the old world, because yes, giants were mingled with the population in those days. Anyway, last week Ron Wyatt passed away in 1999, and he's a very humble man from Tennessee. God showed him a lot of stuff. I do think his theology is a bit messed up, and maybe that's why God took him off the scene. But his wife, Mary Nell, on the channel ronwyatt.com, which is on YouTube, has been doing some interviews about how he found the Ark of the Covenant, and a bunch of those sections of that interview went out this last week. Real interesting. You should go look that up if you're interested in this stuff. But they know where the Ark of the Covenant is. They've got it. They've got all the trappings. They have a menorah. I don't know if it's the original menorah or not. I never did fully trace this out, but at one point in time, so the Knights Templar seem to have been involved with Oak Island, and at one point in time someone told me that the golden menorah from the temple was hidden in the vault on Oak Island. Now, there's that TV show about Oak Island that just constantly fails to ever deliver anything of real interest, and you're watching those guys with, excavators digging in the mud and trying to get into the vault and all this other nonsense. I think they figured a way to get into that vault a long time ago and got out all the things that needed to be gotten out. Or if not, they made replicas from various drawings and from the scriptures in accordance with the scriptures. But they do have the original Ark of the Covenant. And there were a lot of the other furnishings of the temple that were hidden with the Ark of the Covenant as well. And I don't know, maybe the golden menorah. Let me think about that. I believe it's the Arch of Titus. Arch of Titus menorah. There's yeah. So there's this section of the Arch of Titus where it shows the menorah being carried off, which is fascinating because in light of whoever it was who told me about the golden candlestick being hidden by the Knights Templar, then in on Oak Island. Whether that's a thing or not, I don't know. But we do have all these depictions of the menorah, and so whether it was recovered from wherever it's been hidden for these millennia, or whether a replica has been created, I don't know. But they've got everything they need to begin the temple sacrifices again, except for the temple. Which is why I did some videos about how it may not be necessary to tear down the Dome of the Rock. There's numerous ways of working around this. Possibly they could build on the so-called Temple Mount site without disturbing the Dome of the Rock. Possibly the actual site of the temple was in the city of David to the south anyways, and the Dome of the Rock site was where the Fortress Antonia was and had nothing to do with the temple in the first place. That's a possibility as well. I don't know that I've ever heard a real scholar discuss that particular theory, and I'd love to hear someone who knows Jerusalem, knows Israel, knows the history, I'd love to hear someone talk about that idea that the Temple Mount never was the Temple Mount in the first place. But anyway, getting off on a bunch of rabbit trails. So this is what I think is going to happen. I believe that the third temple is going to be built, the sacrifices will begin, and this, by the way, and so for a year, 7 years or a week of years, the Antichrist is going to confirm this covenant with the people of Israel, and understand this is going to be a horrific, horrific thing. Firstly, it is unnecessary. Jesus Christ is our completed sacrifice. The blood of goats and bulls never atoned for sin. It was a system that pointed ahead to the Messiah, the true sacrifice for sins. But this system, let me just ask you a question. How do you think the world is going to respond when they see a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem and the animal sacrifices begin again? We're talking about millions of animals being slaughtered and eviscerated, cut into pieces, and parts of them burned. We're talking about literal rivers of blood. This level of horrific spectacle has not been seen for thousands of years. How do you think the world's going to? I think it's going to make the world even more hateful of the Jewish people, is what I think is going to happen. And during this period, this 45 days when Christians are being hunted down, Jewish people are also being hunted down and killed. I think there's a complete betrayal of Israel, and it's not going to be good, which is why Jesus was telling his listeners, when you see the abomination of desolation, and he's obviously talking to those who are in the Holy Land, he says, flee to the mountains, because at that point, Antichrist is coming for everybody. He's coming for the Jewish people, and he's coming for Christians. And he's going to wage war against the saints, and he's going to wage war against God's people. Because evil has always tried to exterminate Jewish people, because if they can wipe out God's people, then they can prove that God can't keep his promises. That's really what it's all about. And all right, so we have a few more thoughts to talk about here. Here's another thought which is real interesting. Daniel 8:14. Daniel 8:14. This is real interesting, and I think I'm onto something here, but I haven't 100% confirmed it. Like, it's not solid in my mind. What is solid in my mind? I do believe that it's going to be a mid-tribulation rapture. This part is solid in my mind. This part is becoming solid in my mind. I think this is a biblically reasoned thing, that there's going to be a period of 7 years before the tribulation, which is when the temple will be functional and the sacrifices will be going on. This is biblically reasoned. I just think it makes, in light of the scriptures, it makes a lot of sense. This is a bit more speculative, what we're talking about next. So let me read this for you. And there's a lot of greater context here that you can read for yourself if you're interested. I'm just going to touch on this. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So 2,300 days, that takes us to about a 6-year mark. And I think what's happening here, so this is me brainstorming. So 2,300 days from the taking away the sacrifices. So it's like Antichrist intervenes. The world is sick of this bloody spectacle, these rivers of gore, these millions of animals being slaughtered. The world's sick of it. Antichrist seizes the temple site and takes away the sacrifices. 2,300 days from this point to here is about 6 years. And then These guys say that how long shall it be for okay, so the sanctuary is being trodden underfoot of presumably Gentiles or unbelievers during this time period. And how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, transgression of desolation, and the sanctuary being trodden underfoot? 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So my thought was when I saw this, is there an event in Revelation where the sanctuary is cleansed? And it is impossible for it to be trodden underfoot any longer. And interestingly enough, we do come to a point that I think fits that bill in Revelation 15. 15:7. Let me read this here. Let's rewind a little bit. Okay. So giving you some context, Revelation 15:1, I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. So God's going to get it done. Seven last plagues. Here's what I think is happening here. I think this period, like approximately the last year of the 7-year tribulation period, is these 7 last plagues. And so let's go down a little bit here. Okay, so firstly, this reveals something interesting, that things here in the physical world are figures of realities in the spiritual realm. We know that there's an Ark of the Covenant in heaven. We know that there's a temple in heaven. And I am going to make mention of this real quick. So Ron Wyatt was a very humble man from Tennessee, and amateur archaeologist. I think he was an anesthesiologist, so not trained archaeologist or anything like that. Christian man, old-fashioned Bible believer, not 100% right on all his theology. He believes some things that are a little weird to me. But he was a humble man of God, and he was very physically courageous, hardworking, and I think God used his skill set and his love of the scriptures, and God used him, and he was involved in discovering a lot of different archaeological sites in the Middle East. The resting place of the Noah's Ark, the Red Sea crossing, which is over on that eastern arm of the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba, from the Nuweiba beach over to the other side. The site of Mount Sinai, the sites of the cities of the plain, Sodom and Gomorrah, and numerous other things. And then finally his career ended with discovering the Ark of the Covenant. And I'm not going to spoil that story. I think you should go over to RonWyatt.com is the name of the YouTube channel. Let's do it that way. And I believe his Ron Wyatt's wife is Mary Nell. There's some interviews on there with Mary Nell about Ron Wyatt's discovery of the Ark of the Covenant. It's an amazing story. And she's since remarried because he passed away in 1999. The Ark of the Covenant was hidden under Mount Moriah. It was hidden under the place where Golgotha was. Alright? So you have Golgotha, the place of the skull, where Jesus was crucified. And then there's this grotto underneath where one of the prophets hid the Ark of the Covenant. So you got to understand that all of Jerusalem is riddled with cave systems. So this is actually kind of interesting. Ron Wyatt was from Tennessee. I live here in East Tennessee. This side of Tennessee and Kentucky is just riddled with all these limestone caves. I think Tennessee has the most it might be the most caves in the United States out of any of the states, but it's definitely way up there. And I think Kentucky's up there on the list as well. Just tons of caves. People are always caving. I love watching caving videos. I never want to do it myself, but watching caving videos from East Tennessee, people finding these long caverns, and then they find human remains of Native Americans in these caves, and it's just insanity. And there's some a huge chambers. One of my favorite videos was these spelunkers going into this cave in Tennessee. There is a mountain inside the cave, and then there's a river flowing through the cave. Just this immense cavern. But anyway, Jerusalem's the same, just all riddled with caves, different levels of caves and artifacts hidden in all these caves, and people are constantly going in there finding treasures, taking it out and selling it, selling them in shops in Jerusalem and stuff like that. But anyway, Ron Wyatt is there in Jerusalem. He's visiting the tomb of Jesus, and his arm points out towards a spot over on Mount Moriah, and he just finds himself saying the words with his mouth that the Ark of the Covenant's hidden over there, and that kicks off this chain of events. He eventually is led to the Ark of the Covenant. He finds it, and when he found it, it was hidden in this cave. One end of the cave had been carved out, so there's sort of a little vault or arch over where the ark was resting. The ark was in a stone sarcophagus with a stone lid. That lid was cracked, and the vault was cracked as well. And what caused that crack? Well, that was the earthquake that took place during the crucifixion. And the site of Golgotha was right above the Ark of the Covenant. So you have the cross. If I can represent it with we'll do a capital T. So you have the cross, and then down here you've got deep underground, you've got the Ark of the Covenant, and then during the crucifixion, there's this earthquake that rends this fissure all the way down, and the blood of Jesus Christ runs down through this fissure in the ground, runs down into this cave through the cracked vaulted ceiling, and drips down through that crack in the stone sarcophagus right onto the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant that had been hidden down there ages before. And that is, I think, pretty interesting. It's interesting for a number of reasons. In the New Testament, we see that Jesus, after his resurrection, at one point he tells his followers not to touch him because he hadn't ascended to heaven yet, to his Father. And I believe the reason for that is he's in a sinless form at that point. He's been resurrected, and he can't contaminate himself because he's got to go apply his blood to the Ark of the Covenant that's in heaven, in the temple there. And but later he's fine with people touching him when he comes back and shows himself again, and he's eating in their presence. I think they give him a honeycomb and a fish in one passage and so forth. But part of the law was that the sacrificial blood the priest had to go into the Holy of Holies, and they did have to put the blood on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. And so that is actually something that had to have happened in order to fulfill the Old Testament law. Jesus couldn't have been the sacrifice without his blood ending up on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. And according to Ron Wyatt, that's exactly what happened. And one day I think these things will be more plain, and we'll know more about this stuff. But absolutely fascinating story. And like I said, you can go hear that interview on Ron Wyatt, the YouTube channel, ronwyatt.com. Let's put YT, ronwyatt.com. Then there is the website, ronwyatt.com. If you are not familiar with that stuff, I'd encourage you to go take a look. It's pretty fascinating. Pretty fascinating. So anyway, got off on that rabbit trail. We're talking about the 2,300 days. So this is the period of time that the abomination of desolation, the taking away of the sacrifices, and the temple area being trodden underfoot by unbelievers is going on. 2,300 days. And so we were asking the question, is there an event in Revelation that at the 2,300 mark that could, or approximately there, that could be at that point, when the temple's purified again? And so we have the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven being opened here. So this is right at the point that God's about to dispense the 7 last plagues. And the 7 angels come out of the temple, the one in heaven, presumably, having the 7 plagues, clothed in pure and white linen, having their breasts girded with golden girdles. And one of the 4 beasts gave unto the 7 angels 7 golden vials full of the wrath of God, who liveth forever and ever. Now here, listen to this. So this is as the 7 plagues, the last plagues, are being dispensed on the earth. When would that happen? Well, they're the last plagues, so it's going to be the last little bit before the second coming of Jesus, this period here, right? But this is fascinating. It says here, and the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no man was able to enter into the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were fulfilled. Now, this previous reference to the temple, the 7 angels coming out of the temple, and the temple of the tabernacle in heaven being opened, that's clearly the tabernacle of the temple or the temple of the tabernacle in heaven that we're talking about in those verses. But what is this verse talking about? Is this verse talking about that temple in heaven being filled with smoke from the glory of God, and no one's able to enter it till the plagues are done? Or is it the temple on earth that this begins to happen? That God sees this rebuilt temple, the animal sacrifices had all been brought back, which honestly, I'm a little bit divided on that, okay? Firstly, let me say this. The Christian has nothing to do with that temple system. Alright? Our perfect sacrifice already died, shed his blood, was raised from the dead. We don't need any more sacrifices. It's done. And so my perspective on that is that, number one, is it an affront and an insult to God and the sacrifice of Jesus? It could be construed that way, most definitely. But then number two, it could also be interpreted as the beginnings of a spiritual awakening in Israel, where they're trying to get back to the faith of their fathers, but they're doing it the wrong way. So it's still a false religious system being carried out through human efforts, but they're trying to approach God by getting back to the Old Testament. And I guess it could be, yes, kind of both of those, really. But one thing I can tell you is that there's no salvation in the blood of goats and bulls. I can tell you that with 100% certainty. But it's like, so first we have the return of the animal sacrifices, and is that an affront to God? Quite possibly, because Jesus, the completed sacrifice, already came and died for sins. And then after that, you have the Antichrist take over the site and desecrate it, and it's trodden underfoot, and it becomes probably the center of the OO Church, the One World Order, Unitarian, Luciferian mystery religion system. And I've heard preachers preach it this way, that the animal sacrifices are going to be replaced with human sacrifices of God's people. That very well may be what the abomination of desolation is. I don't know. But you can kind of see the reasoning behind that, right? Like, the world's going to look at the sacrifice of these animals and they're going to be like, oh, that's disgusting. Those innocent animals. How would you like it if you were sacrificed? And then the Antichrist goes in, takes over the site, and there's this abomination of desolation. What is that? Does he take maybe the priests and sacrifice them there in the temple? Like, How do you like it? You were sacrificing all these animals. Now we're gonna sacrifice you. Me and my one world government. We're gonna give you justice. They would probably call it. If you love this sacrificial system so much, we'll make you a sacrifice. I can see that happening. I don't know with certainty that that is what's going to happen, but I can see that happening. All right, let's see where we are time wise. Oh boy, 1 hour mark. All right, I'll try to wrap this up fairly quick in the next 20 minutes or so. Okay, so I hope you may not be 100% on board with me with some of this stuff, all right, but you can at least see the breadcrumb trail. I hope. Lord willing, I hope that you can see the breadcrumb trail and why I believe that this is how things will play out. And my thought is that during this time, while the plagues are being dispensed, the temple of God is inaccessible. And I do mean the one in Jerusalem. So we talked about how earthly things are a figure of heavenly, and there's a temple in heaven, there's an Ark of the Covenant in heaven, there's one on the earth as well, and the temple's going to be rebuilt here, I believe. And so maybe this is a reference to the temple in heaven is filled with smoke and no one can enter. It's being purified. The plagues are being dispensed to purify the earth. But my thought is, if the heavenly temple and the earthly one are linked, then possibly this stuff is happening in the earthly one as well. That it's filled with smoke from the glory of God and from His power. Like all this stuff's been done in His temple, basically blaspheming His name. And then He's like, I've had enough. We're dispensing the 7 plagues, and the glory of God fills the temple. Smoke is pouring out of it. No one's able to enter it, and until the plagues are fulfilled. And that would make a ton of sense in light of this 2,300 days in Daniel 8:14. Okay, so there's another event we need to talk about that I think is going to be in here as well. And this is an uncomfortable one, but it's got to be mentioned. Well, do we have to talk about it now? Or maybe I should call it quits on this one. I think we're going to talk about Revelation 6, and then I think we're going to wrap up this video. There's an entity called Mystery Babylon, and at some point I'm going to have to talk about it. I've written a book about it, and I've really been hoping for the last 5 years that someone would disprove me. I believe that America's Mystery Babylon. And the more time goes on, the more I am convinced that this is the case, and that this country is going to be done before we get into the... I think America is going to end before we even... either within this period sometime, or even possibly before the temple gets rebuilt. I think America is going to be destroyed and taken away. And anyway, I'll just give you a little background on this book. I decided to do a deep dive into the Mystery Babylon prophecies. I had some time on my hands. I think I was house sitting my grandma's house while she was on vacation. And I was studying from Jeremiah, from Isaiah, from Revelation. I wasn't just looking at Revelation in isolation. I was looking at these other prophets as well. And it became really obvious. Mystery Babylon is this consumerist nation that the peoples of the earth flow into. Jeremiah makes it clear that there's even groups of people that flow into her. They're immigrants, and they're there for the purpose of seasonal workers to harvest crops. This is a land of rivers. This is a nation that has a wall. This is a nation that has a mother nation. This is a nation that is destroyed during a civil war. A civil war arises in the land. Violence in the land, ruler against ruler, and then a coalition of Eastern powers rises up and destroys it in one day. You start really studying things out, it's a pretty inescapable conclusion that the United States is Mystery Babylon. And I wrote this book. I want to say this was my second book. My first book was I took the Psalms and wrote them out as poetry, and it was really well received in the church I was going to at the time. Everyone wanted a copy. A really, feel good kind of book. Illustrated by my sister. Really nice book. When I published this one, I gave it to some pastors, and none of them liked it very much at all. But everyone who reads it, open-mindedly, as you can see, the rating here is pretty high. Kind of inescapable conclusions, and this was written before COVID and before the stolen presidential election of 2020, so maybe it needs an update at this point, but a lot of it holds up very well in 2025, I'm sad to say. But where are we right now in Bible prophecy? Well, personally, I believe that we are in Revelation 6, the time of the so-called four horsemen of the apocalypse. I believe that this is the lead up to the tribulation period. Just like in the ancient world, horsemen were scouts, or the advance guard, or messengers of an army that was coming behind them. I believe that that's what these horsemen are as well, that they are harbingers of the tribulation. And some pretty terrible things are going to happen during this time of the four horsemen. A lot of people are saying that we're in Satan's little season. Well, if you search little season in Revelation, there's actually two little seasons. We're not in either one of them right now. One little season is this period, the 45 days, a period that's going to get shortened, otherwise no flesh would survive. For the sake of the elect, God shortens this period. This is when the Antichrist is making war on the saints, hunting down Christians and killing us. The other little seasons during the time of the millennial kingdom, when Satan rises up and tries to stage one last rebellion, and it's put down by God with fire from heaven. We're not in either of those little seasons right now. If you seriously think that Satan is fully unleashed right now, you're wrong. You're wrong. Not even. If anything, what we're seeing right now in the disclosure that we're seeing is just people being made aware of how things have been for 2,000 years, alright? The degenerate royals, these Nephilim descended rulers who rule over us, they've always been wicked and debauched. Tiberius was the emperor during the time of Jesus. He was a voracious pedophile. He liked boys and girls. When he'd had his way with them, he would have them thrown over the cliffs of his villa. And archaeologists in the modern era have found dozens and dozens of child skeletons on the rocks where his villa used to be. It's always been this way. It's always been this way. And it is going to get much, much worse. And the reason I'm talking about these things is because I think a lot of people are in this fantasy world where Walt Disney movies have rotted their brains and they think everyone's going to get a happy ending and it's going to be easy and there's never going to be any suffering or difficulty. That's not what Jesus promised. The Bible says those who endure to the end will be saved. There's going to be some rough stuff coming. Folks, you haven't seen anything yet. My parents are, when it comes to people I know personally, and not on the internet, my parents are some of the most aware people that I know. Very mature Christians. They both taught Sunday school, studied the Bible for many years. Good people. They practice what they preach. They're very old-fashioned, though. And I know for a fact they're not ready for what's coming. And they're trying to get ready. Now, I moved here to Tennessee, and then a year later they moved down here. They stayed with me for a year, and now they're building a homestead, trying to become more food independent and so forth. They can tell that some bad stuff's coming for sure. But, there's some conspiracy theories and levels to this stuff that I can't talk with them about. They already think I'm crazy, uh, but they're slowly coming around. Um, they're at least willing to consider the things that I share with them and think them through, reason through them from the scriptures and so forth. But I tell them and I tell other people, you haven't seen anything yet. Satan is not loosed right now. Not really. We're still during the phase of power consolidation, where the evil world powers, the world shadow government, is kind of consolidating power. We're not to the point where that's been achieved yet. We are slowly seeing more and more occult things come out into the open, and that's going to continue. But let's just look at what's going to happen in this lead up period. So, and I'm just going to go ahead and do type a couple more things in here. Type some fractions out. 1/4. I'm putting it here because I think it's going to kind of be in all this time up until the abomination of desolation, maybe. Then 1/3. And I'm putting it here because I'm not entirely sure. I think this is more going to be the second half. Actually, we'll put it here. I think this is more the second half of the tribulation period, but it's 1/3. And then all Christ's enemies. So what do I mean by these things? Well, let me explain them. The lead up to the tribulation, 1/4 of humanity is going to die off and be killed. We're going to see this in Revelation 6 in just a moment. And then judgments during the tribulation will kill off a further 1/3 of humanity. And then finally, during the second coming of Christ, anyone who's not sealed, all Christ's enemies are going to be slain. All of them wiped out. These are the things that are coming. And we're going to see a good part of these horrors before we even get to the rapture. And you might say, well, how is it possible that a fourth are going to die during the lead up? Well, something like 2/3 of humanity injected themselves with an experimental mRNA so-called vaccine. It's not a vaccine. A vaccine works by putting a weakened pathogen into your body, and then your immune system naturally fights it off. That's a vaccine. The mRNA injections modify your DNA and make your cells manufacture substances that supposedly fight off COVID-19. If you've taken a COVID vax, you're a genetically modified organism. And let me just say, I mean, I'm seeing non-establishment doctors saying that everyone who took the vaccine, unless they got one of the placebo versions, and there was a fair percentage of them that were placebo, death within 12 years is what some of these people are saying. There's a lot of stuff in those vaccines that the public is not aware of. They were highly experimental, emergency use authorization. They never went through safety testing. Pfizer went to their control group when they were doing testing, and they said, hey, you guys are the control group. Do you just want to get the actual vaccine? And the vast majority of their control group, with the exception of a handful of individuals, said, yeah, just give us the real deal. They never did the things that they were supposed to do to make sure that these things were safe. And by the way, they're not safe. They're not. You should look into COVID vaccine detoxification. Look up nattokinase and look up, well, that's a good starting point, nattokinase. But, my goodness, folks, the level of deception. So that right there is what we would call pharmakeia It's the root word for pharmaceuticals, but the word just means sorcery in the scriptures, and it's deception. Anyway, so you have these four horses of the apocalypse. What do they represent? Well, you've got the one with the white horse. He's got a bow. He's got a crown. The word corona means crown in dozens of languages. In fact, it means crown in English too. Coronation, the crowning of a new monarch. So you have this guy, he's got an airborne weapon. He's got a crown, he's going forth, conquering and to conquer. In other words, conquering, that's what he's doing, and to conquer, that's his intention. He was designed to conquer, to take power from the people and consolidate it under the world shadow government. He's got this airborne weapon. He's got this crown, or corona. I do believe that this guy represents bioweapons and man-made pandemics and vaccine bioweapons. Then we've got the red horse, warfare, taking peace from the earth that they should kill one another. Then we have another horse, black horse, pair of balances, highly expensive staple food items, basically economic hardship and famine. And then we have pale horse, death. So this is just death in all of its forms. Death, hell, kill with sword, kill with hunger, kill with death, and kill with beasts of the earth. This ties into my other videos about Nephilim descended creatures, about werewolves, about cryptids. These things are coming back. They're becoming more prevalent. During the end times, beasts of the earth are going to kill, I mean, it's right here, a fourth part of the earth are going to be killed, and beasts of the earth are going to be a contributing factor to that, so they're obviously going to be killing a large number of people, millions of people. I believe that we are already, so the seals are precursors. A seal, that's what it is. It's a precursor to something else happening. The seals are precursors to the tribulation period. And, or I think there is some overlap here. Maybe precursors to the abomination of desolation and the wrath of God might be a better way to put it. So, because one of these seals, this one here, the fifth seal, I saw under the altar are the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. So this is the purging of the saints. That would seem to me to coincide with the 45 days. So your horsemen of the apocalypse start way out here, before, like right now, where we are now. In fact, I'll go ahead and just put now. We're here somewhere. The temple hasn't been built yet. The sacrifices haven't begun yet. We're out here. Revelation 6 has already started. We're in the lead up. A lot of those seals are already coming unsealed. And then eventually the, what was it, the fifth seal? Fifth seal, the saints are being killed for their faith. I believe that that's this period here, the 45 days. And then some of these things, the sun and moon being darkened and so forth, these are later on in the latter half, the wrath of God period of the tribulation. I think the sun and moon being darkened is specifically a sign of the second coming. I may try to dig in more detail on the events of the last half of the tribulation and lay some of that stuff out in better detail going forward, but I think this video right now has gotten a bit long, and so we're going to cut it short at this point. I think I've kind of laid out my worldview, and I think I've substantiated my prophetic worldview, I suppose, and I think I've substantiated it from the scriptures. Lord willing, at a later date, we'll talk about Mystery Babylon and what's coming for America. And then possibly we'll talk about things in the latter half of the tribulation in a little more detail, Lord willing. Like I say, Lord willing, because my mind's always going a million miles an hour in different directions, and then of course everything's limited by how much energy I've got on a given day, so there's that. Alright, well, you guys have a good one. Bye.